Welcome. In this video, I'm breaking down what the Hermetic Principle of Correspondence is and how to embody it so that you can embrace a mastery over the Hermetic Principles. Hello, welcome back to the channel. My name's Gabby and I'm here to help you be the hero of your story. So in this video series, I'm breaking down my personal interpretation of the philosophy of Hermes Trismegistus, which is basically embodied into one book known as the Kybalion. Of course, there's a little bit of gray space in there about what the actual interpretation is, but in my first video, I gave an overview about what the Kybalion is in the first place. So if you're curious about what exactly is Hermes Trismegistus, what exactly is the Kybalion, go check out that video first. But now I'm going to be breaking down essentially chapter by chapter, going through the book, but also more specifically, I'm breaking down the 7 Hermetic principles along the way so that you can truly understand the complexity of these very spiritually open-ended principles that make up the philosophy of life, the philosophy of reality, and that when understood properly actually helps us live in the fullest expression of this human experience. It lets us step into our spiritual power, step into our purpose, and within all of that, stepping into our purpose, it helps relieve us of the suffering of that we have in this three-dimensional reality. The Kybalion and the Hermetic principles help us step into the full capacity of what our existence is, the physical, the mental, and the spiritual planes of existence. And as we dive into this second principle in the law of correspondence, you're going to understand that even deeper. So before I dive into what the law of correspondence is, one note I want to add is how interesting it is that each Hermetic principle, and this is not directly stated, but it seems to me that each principle is built upon the last. And so you really have to understand the first one to be able to understand the second one. And by doing so, by going in this order of 1st through 7th, you'll naturally begin to go through this, in a way, this linear process of mastery. Each principle in the 7 principles provides a direct, or maybe not direct, but it provides a next step in the process of trying to integrate this high spiritual knowledge in our very mortal minds. And so law of correspondence is the first step, in a way, to understanding the foundation, which is the all is mind. The all is mind is a concept that we have to wrap our heads around, but we wrap our heads around this concept by first looking at the law of correspondence. Okay, so what is the principle of correspondence? The principle of correspondence is embodied in the Kybalion's terms in a very, very simple statement. And the statement is, as above, so below, as below, so above. Quote the Kybalion. So this principle basically suggests that all of our planes of existence are linked. They are connected. They correspond. And I think that's the simplest way. It's perhaps an oversimplified version of trying to explain what the principle of correspondence is, but it's called the principle of correspondence because the basic gist is to understand that all the planes correspond to one another. They are intricately linked and they cannot be separated. Now, like I shared in my last Hermetic Principles view, I like to share not only the deeper spiritual meaning that Hermes Trismegistus and even the 3 initiates are trying to convey with this, but also a little bit more of the applicable interpretation of this to our very mortal lives. Okay, so the high spiritual interpretation of this, I kind of like this one section that they share in the 3 initiates Kybalion, which is that the ancient Hermeticists considered this principle as one of the most important mental instruments by which man was able to pry aside the obstacles which hid view from the unknown. So for example, what they mean by this is basically like this principle allows us to see what is unseen. We are enabled to know more of the unknown. And this is absolutely a part of the principle of correspondence. But there's a bit more of a personal alchemy that also occurs with the principle of correspondence that Hermes and the 3 initiates wouldn't even deny, but rather can often be overlooked if you look too much into the spiritual aspect. So the part of the principle of correspondence that I get most excited to share is this part of inner shadow work, really. Shadow work is the most simplified version to explain it, but it's this idea that as above, so below, or as below, so above. But even more so, another way to explain it is the term as within, so without. And even before I knew about the Kybalion. I shared in my first video how some of these Hermetic principles and these philosophies were things that I had naturally discovered, in my research, in my personal journey, and was just naturally inclined toward. And even many of them even became this kind of North Star for me in periods of my life where I struggled. But these simple statements, such as above, so below, these became my North Stars, and they got me through some of the hardest times in my life. We're not even knowing that these were essentially the 7 fundamental laws of reality, principles of ascension and enlightenment, whatever you want to call it, these principles of understanding the nature of reality. And so I just came across these, and this principle is easily the most impactful thing I ever heard in my whole life. I discovered it not knowing that it was Hermes Trismegistus who discovered this, who shared this knowledge, who shared this wisdom, but I found it and it felt like truth to me, which is what this is. So many of the Hermetic principles, when you discover them, will feel like coming back home, coming back into your truth, coming back into the nature of who you are, this energetic being expressing itself. And these 7 principles create essentially the fundamental rules of this energy expressing itself on multiple planes, not just the physical plane, but the multiple planes of existence that we're actually interacting on, that many of us haven't even awakened to, all these multidimensional aspects of ourselves. As above, so below applied to me very closely, because I was going through this phase in my life where I was really, I was struggling, but I was struggling not necessarily in a precursor hero's journey. I like to refer to the hero's journey a lot because it has been this kind of just natural thought process for me to get through those struggles. But, in a hero's journey, we have struggle that happens in the beginning. Like, imagine you're watching a movie and you're watching like Harry Potter or a superhero movie or even just any old movie. And generally the character, the hero, is struggling at the beginning. And those struggles are good because they're called to actions, called to adventures, called to pursue the obstacle, pursue the path, pursue the conflict, pursue the desire, and be willing to face the conflict. And that was not necessarily the struggle that I was in per se, but I was in the phase of being in my least favorite and my favorite part of the hero's journey. And the distinguishing part of what makes it a hero's journey is the dark night of the soul. So a hero goes on this journey, they have a call to adventure, then they're in it. They're like, oh shoot, I went after this thing and now I'm in it and I can't turn back. And now they're in this realm of obstacles and they have to face these struggles and they really can't turn back. They're already in it. They've seen something they can't unsee. They've done something they can't undo. Usually a mentor comes along, a guide comes along, whether that's chosen for them or whether it's just, however it occurs, and it might be someone intimately in your life, or it might just be something that's not intimately known to you. And you come across this path, and the trials and tribulations get harder and harder until eventually there's this fallout. There's this dark night of the soul. And I think if you think of any stereotypical heroic book series or movie series, there's this point they get to where they seem like they failed, they lost. There's no solution. And generally speaking, dark nights of the soul are when we have to go into the deepest parts of ourselves. And this is why it's dark night of the soul. And of course, there's a biblical reference in there of going to this dark night of the soul, where we have to embrace now, because we're in this pain, we're in this darkness, everything around us is dark. And now we have no option but to sit with that darkness. It's all around us, it's all consuming. There's not light. There might be a light to be seen at the end of the tunnel. And that light to be seen at the end of the tunnel gives us hope, gives us the capacity to handle this darkness. Otherwise, we would just give up. But that's what distinguishes a hero from a victim. The hero sees this darkness as opportunity. And this brings us into the principle of correspondence. For as deeply as you go within yourself is for as extensively you will expand outwards into the highest expression of your being. And so when I was going through a struggle, this was about two full years ago, I was going through the struggle being in my dark night of the soul. And I was in my dark night of the soul, and I know it was dark night of the soul, not the precursor, because I was here in this point where I had already faced all these conflicts. I've already gone through so many of these things and these issues, and I was bringing to my awareness my deeper subconscious beliefs, my personal childhood programming, my self-limiting beliefs, the things I hated about myself, all the things I couldn't forgive, all the betrayals that happened in my life, the people I couldn't trust, how I couldn't trust myself. All of this negativity of my psyche was coming forward after this period of the precursor period of bringing that intentionally to awareness. That doesn't just show up now on its own. You have to have the intention prior to that, and then all of a sudden you're getting to this point in your life where it comes up. And I was in that, all consuming, all this pain and sadness was like washing over me, and it not necessarily like, oh my gosh, I'm emotional all the time, but I was just feeling basically a constant state of feeling triggered and kind of allowing that to happen. That's a good thing, to allow those triggers. That's how trauma healing happens. That's how healing your inner child occurs. We get closer, and the closer we get to the root, the more it arises more often, actually, because we actually become less emotionally numb. And this is a little bit of a tangent here, I know. But stay with me, because this is the whole point, I believe, of the principle of correspondence, why it is so important in your life. Yes, it is super wonderful to awaken us to the spiritual nature of reality. But as for you on your journey, you can't awaken to the spiritual nature of reality unless you have awakened to your own inner power. And this is also, again, a representation of the principle of correspondence. You cannot step into the exterior, the spiritual field, unless you've gone inward into your internal emotional field. As within, so without. And so as you go into yourself, as I went into myself, I came across this statement, as within, so without, as above, so below, and that gave me the faith. That gave me the faith to see through the illusions, to see through the deception, to see through the fear. And know that for as deeply as I was going within myself and feeling all the sadness and the anger and the betrayal and the hurt, I was beginning to realize that the more I allowed that to happen and allowed myself to feel those feelings, that energy that was being stored, I knew that if I did that, it was going to help me step through and shine my light for the first time in my life. I had not shined my light for the first time in my life prior to that. It was like I was a weakened version of myself. And I remember distinctly coming out of that. And over the process of perhaps a year, perhaps the dark night of the soul period for me took a year, but in the year that followed that, I've stepped into my light, in my authentic self, and my purpose, which is just my authentic self, more than ever in my whole life. And it's because I went deeper than I ever had before. As within, so without. Now, that is the personal purpose version, I would say, of the principle of correspondence. But there's other parts of it I wanted to share, and quite honestly, I didn't plan on sharing that part at the beginning. I planned on sharing it at the end, but I just got so excited about sharing this part because I do believe it is so important. But there's a couple other parts of the principle of correspondence that lead to mastery, that help us embody a fulfilling expression in the 3-dimensional, 4-dimensional existence. And I want to start by sharing how the principle of correspondence suggests and teaches us the wisdom that all creation, all things in this plane, come from the higher plane. Now, why is that? Okay, so as above, so below, and as within, so without, I think of as a mirror. And so this mirror all reflects. Now, there's two ways to look at it. One is that as within, so without. So as I think and feel affects my external reality. And let's start there. So this idea of the principle of correspondence influences the way that we encourage ourselves to think and feel and believe. Because if I think that I'm love, light, and joy, life is beautiful, I'm so happy and grateful and joyous, and I see the beauty in all things, then life presents to me everything that is beautiful. Joy, love, light, all the beautiful things. Life is beautiful. Because that is my inner world, as within, so without, creates my external world. And so if I have belief systems, now the big thing that you have to understand with this as within, so without, it is not just what we think. Because remember, only 5% of what goes on in our minds is conscious. The other 95% is subconscious, operating from our deeper psyche, our subconscious, our belief systems. And much of those belief systems come from our childhood programming that in a way was kind of just handed to us by our parents. Now, not being the victims here, but much of it was just handed to us by society. So much of what we see in the world is just because that was what was implemented into our belief systems, and now it's as within, so without. It's perpetuating itself. And this is why it's so important to have a mindfulness and mindset journey and stepping into rewiring your brain and stepping into your own creator power. Because if I think and feel the other way around, if I feel like I'm hurt, if I feel like life is hard, if I feel like life is suffering, and maybe that you weren't told this exactly, but maybe you picked up, maybe that's the message that was perceived to you indirectly as a child. Life is hard. Life is suffering. You will struggle. Relationships are hard. Love doesn't exist. Whatever it is, people will betray you. I could go on and on and on and on. those beliefs that are in us, even if they're not in words, are going to be in the external world. The world will mirror what we believe. And so in many ways, what you perceive in the external world is not what is, it is what you believe. And this is something that rings true through all of life, right? Like whatever we believe in, this could be the grand scheme of our lives, right? Or it can be something very, very specific, like what we think is going to happen when we step outside our door every day. What we think, what we believe, as within, so without. This is because we as beings, and this is where we build on the first law. As I shared in the first law, we are all part of one collective mind, one collective psyche, one collective thought, one collective subconscious. And so everything that materializes in the world, if we are all energy and all is mind, and we are fragments within this greater mind, then it only makes sense that the principle of correspondence suggests that everything that occurs is coming from somewhere in the deeper psyche, in the subconscious psyche. This principle suggests that all creation comes from the unmanifest. And this is very interesting on top of it, because what many scientists now know that 95% of our universe is also dark matter, dark energy. It's very similar to how 95% of our mind is subconscious. There's a very deep philosophical correlation here between the physical manifestation has nothing to do with this physical world being the way it is. All things that are creation come from the unmanifest, the unseen, and the invisible. And therefore, maybe perhaps on that same thought process, then what are we? Where are we coming from? That's quite a bit of a tangent thought process there that perhaps can help you awaken to the significance and insignificance of yourself. But yet, coming back into ourselves and on our personal journeys here, everything that you are seeing in the world is coming from the way that you are perceiving the world. Your outer world is not the outer world itself. Your outer world is the inner. And so therefore your life is the inner. And when you really comprehend this, really apply this wisdom, it teaches us that we really need to dive in and start to dissect our programming. You can't just let it keep running. I mean, you can, but there's no integration of wisdom there. The Kybalion and the Hermetic philosophy encourages and teaches the idea of alchemy. Alchemy is going in and into yourself and transforming states, transforming from a state of negativity and transforming into a state of not even just positivity, but really of your divine sense of love, because you are a being of pure love at your finest. All is mind and the mind is love. Transforming into love is really what your purpose is all about, so that you are going through your life. And if you think, this is why when people go through their life, and people who are haters and people who are angry, people obviously just say, oh, there's just a hurt person. That person must be so angry at their life. And that is true, because that's what they believe life is. And part of it's not their fault. Maybe they were just given really bad tools to know what to believe about the world. But you can make the conscious decision at any point in time to change how you believe. It takes some work. And it's not necessarily easy, but you absolutely can. There's nothing saying that you cannot. You have the ability to step in and change how you want to perceive the world. And when you do that, this is where manifestation comes in. Sure, and sure, maybe manifestation is a little bit more of a selfish version of trying to apply this principle. But again, you stepping into your desire and your authentic self is the all that is mind expressing itself. You are a hero here, trying to fulfill the journey of you as a character here on earth in this incarnation. You living into your hero's journey by going after a desire, by trying to manifest things, is the all of mind expressing itself. In the end, the principle of correspondence teaches us something very simple. If you don't face your shadows, you're going to see your shadows in the world. If you face your shadows, if you embrace them and go into that dark night of the soul, you can transmute them, you can alchemize them, and then you alchemize and transform your outer world. But if you don't, and you let those shadows stay shadows, they still exist and operate and rule that 95% that is subconscious, and therefore, because it is ruling your thoughts, ruling your beliefs, it will manifest in your life, and your shadows will never escape you. Those shadows about what you fear and what you believe about the world, that maybe life is scary and life is hard and like people, I can't trust them and nobody loves me and I don't matter and I'm insignificant. Your life is going to manifest these things and situations that perpetuate and make you do feel like you don't matter and you're insignificant, you're not good enough, you're not lovable. Face your shadows. Now, on this note of facing your shadows and talking about the hero's journey here, I want to share this quote of Joseph Campbell. And Joseph Campbell came up with this, he wrote the book about the phases of the hero's journey and kind of conceptualized this hero's journey philosophy into a wisdom and a teaching and a philosophy that kind of applies to every story and also applies to the personal story, not just story and fiction here. And Joseph Campbell's quote that I want to share is that the inner world is the world of your requirements and your energies and your structure and your possibilities that meet the outer world. And the outer world is the field of your incarnation. That's where you are. You've got to keep both going. As Novalis said, the seat of the soul is there where the inner and the outer worlds meet. And quite frankly, that is a very beautiful way to simply describe what the principle of correspondence is. Who knows, maybe he did know that he was really explaining the principle of correspondence, but maybe he didn't. Maybe he was just in tune with the nature of reality and the nature of himself and his personal purpose. But you have to face that inner world. Your inner world is what is creating your outer world. Your inner world of what you, and I like this way that he explained it, that your requirements, your energies, your structure, and your possibilities. Those are some interesting words to kind of instigate, because when I sit here and I explain, oh, what you believe about the world is manifested. Well, what is your believing about the world? What does that entail? Your beliefs about all of reality can be hard to identify because it's so open-ended, because it's everything that you think. But these are good starting point words here, and I really, really like them. Your requirements. We have beliefs about what we require in our life. And these are the good things. These are the true survival things. These are also the things that are not the true survival things, but what we require to have a good life. What does a good life mean to you? That's your requirements. What does a bad life mean to you? Those are your requirements. Your possibilities. What are you capable of? What do you believe that is possible? What do you believe that is possible? That one is a make or break one. Open your mind to believe that more is possible and it will be manifested in the world. Possibilities will be all around you. Your structure. The structure of how you need to operate, the structure of how you need to feel, the structure of the dynamics of the people playing out in your life, the structure of how you would like to live your routines and your habits, your work environment, how you engage in work. Is it something that's free flowing? Is it something that's, that's repetitive? Is it something that's physical? Is it something non-physical? This quote is an amazing starting point for you to really consider what beliefs are that are being manifested in your life. Now, there's another way to look at this principle that is also part of that mindfulness and mindset and personal purpose journey here. So yes, we go in and we can be like, yeah, I have these beliefs. Clearly, I think that life is hard. I think that I don't matter. I know those ones. And maybe you say that, okay, well, I have this mindfulness practice, and you know your limitations. Maybe you're starting from there. But then at the same time, I think this principle is very helpful, because what the outer world expresses indicates what our inner world is. And this is perhaps way more helpful than going the other way around, because mindfulness is not necessarily easy when 95% is subconscious, and most of our lives is spent in the beta state where we are unable to actually be mindful of what is going on a subconscious level. We can only notice what is going on a subconscious level when we are in an alpha or theta state, theta brainwave state, and we don't allow for that space in our lives. We should, but the other way to go about this with the principle of correspondence is to use the things that occur in your life to indicate to you what is happening internally. And so if you go through your life and, you say, relationships are an easy one. If you attract the same type of person in a relationship, if your family dynamics are always a certain way, if your friendships are always a certain way, or something always happens in your friendships, and this can be macro or micro here. So the things that you notice in conversation with other people, like what are you noticing in conversation? What is that telling you about your inner world, or what you're believing about how that interaction is going to be? What about a little bit more macro here? What is the thematic similarity that always shows up across relationships, not just the romantic ones, not just the friendships, not just the family? What is the theme that you see in all relationships in your life, and how is that interacting? What does that say about you? What is shown in the outer world indicates the inner world. And I think by now you've interpreted this wisdom. Hopefully by now in this video you have internalized that. So now I want to step into a little bit more of the spiritual, interesting aspect of the principle of correspondence that also encourages wisdom, also encourages some mindfulness and some level of stepping into our personal purpose. And perhaps on a very simple level, it is simply inspiring for you. And this is the idea that, sure, we have physical and outer and inner. Those are two sides of the as above, so below. Or perhaps that's the as within, so without, so within. But there's also the principle of correspondence more directly states that as above, so below. What is above, though? What is this above that the Kybalion and Hermes Trismegistus are speaking of? As above is generally kind of considered this spiritual plane of existence. And I don't care what you want to call that. I don't care if you want to call that the universe, if you want to call it God, if you want to call it heaven. I don't care what you call it. But there's, without a doubt, from the intuitive space, without a doubt, there is this spiritual dimension of existence, this spiritual plane of existence that we know that we can tap into, especially when we decrystallize our pineal gland and we step into our third eye power. We can connect to that spiritual energy, that different energy that's not like the energy that we experience here on earth. It's not like the energy of the body. It's not even like the energy of the mind. It is the energy of the spirit plane. And so when it says as above, so below, the principle of correspondence also applies something more grand. It implies that everything that happens on this physical plane of existence came from somewhere in the heavens, came from somewhere in the spiritual plane. And this is so open, and it's perhaps impossible for our minds in this plane of existence to comprehend what that could look like, what that could mean, because remember, it's this energetic existence that we are unable to fully interpret, because 99% of frequencies are unable to be interpreted by our five senses. And so we're using our sixth sense here, intuition. Our sixth sense is intuition. We're using intuition to try and understand the full meaning of what this is. What does this actually look like in our lives? I'm not exactly sure. When they say, as above in the heavens, so below on this earth, perhaps it's implying a multidimensional reality. Perhaps it's implying that there are realities similar to ours that are happening in other dimensions. Perhaps there are things that are happening like this theme of our universe happening in other universes. Perhaps it's something more subtle, less rational, less linear. And at the same time, we can be a little bit more direct with it. Maybe we could say that as above, so below. Maybe that means that things that happen in Earth, or even in our lives. So let's take global Earth. Let's say, interactions between countries, political, economic, societal, socioeconomic conditions are influenced by the heavens and the spirit plane. And maybe it's just an energy. It's a frequency. And that's what I believe it is more. A frequency of the heavens and of the spirits that is influencing the global, socioeconomic, energetic existence of this plane, of this earth. I believe that is what the principle of correspondence is here to teach us. And when we do that, perhaps we have compassion for the global evolution, for the collective evolution. And then maybe at the same time, as above, so below also maybe means that situations we find ourselves in our life, those negative ones, those positive ones, maybe they are as above a frequency of the spiritual plane that is divinely guiding us. Maybe it is something up there, and I don't mean up there literally, I mean in the higher dimensional, higher vibrational frequency band of the spirit plane. Maybe there is a vibration there that is as above influencing the below. And that might imply us. Maybe we are significant enough as characters within the all that is mind that is being specifically targeted to experience this frequency and this vibration in our lives. Now, if you watched my video initially about the Kybalion, you'll know that the Kybalion was really the forefront of wisdom. And the creator, and I shouldn't even say the Kybalion, Hermes Trismegistus was essentially the very first philosopher of astrology, alchemy, and psychology. He was the root of those three things. And so astrology was very highly acknowledged at the time. The spirituality, not astronomy, astrology, was highly validated by Hermes Trismegistus. And so I kind of talked about how the principle of correspondence relates to that, because basically all of these Hermetic principles come back into those three things in some way. It might not be the be all end all, but they do have a correlation there. And so I talked about how the principle of correspondence interacts with our psychology, our psyche, our inner psyche, our subconscious psyche, manifests in the external world as within, so without. It also influences our alchemy. For as deeply as we go into ourselves, as we go into our shadows, until we face our shadow, we will be met by our shadow. And that is alchemy. When we embrace our shadow, when we dissect our shadow, then we clear the shadow in the external world. And now there's this interesting aspect of astrology that the principle of correspondence also applies to, or is rather the other way around, that astrology applies to the principle of correspondence. And this is just a relationship that, in a way, is just simply trying to validate what we here at Be the Hero Academy believe, and what many other astrologers believe, which is that the energy of each planet carries a frequency and a vibration and a specific code of frequency. And our time of birth, we are imprinted with this energy based on the location of those planets and how the time we are born, the energetic imprint of where those planets are in our solar system and in our universe creates this energetic stamp onto our being. And the principle of correspondence is basically suggesting that, well, we're talking about as above, so below here. Well, maybe we're not talking necessarily about the heavens, and maybe we're not talking about the spirit, but maybe we are, because maybe the astrology of as without is our astrology. It's our solar system. It's the planetary universe. As above in the planets, so below. As the planets are, it influences the individual at the time of birth, or perhaps as above, the energy of the planets influences the collective situations. And there's also a component in the principle of correspondence where they were talking about how, and I was reading an interpretation of what someone thought of this, and I liked how they said, and this is again what astrologers also believe, no astrologer, no real astrologer is going to tell you that the planets dictate what you do or be. It doesn't dictate what happens on Earth. It does not dictate who the person you become. It influences you with frequency, energy. Because when you understand that everything is energy, it makes sense. If everything has a personal energetic field, then and our Earth has a personal energetic field, then how do the planets not have an energetic field? And how, if the energy is constantly in motion and everything is one field of energy, how does it not influence one another? And so that's the correlation simply between the principle of correspondence and principle of correspondence and astrology. It simply is saying that astrology is the principle of correspondence, perfectly expressing itself as above, as out there, as below, as within. The frequency out there, as without, is going to influence the energy of within when you're born. It's going to influence you as you go through your life constantly. And that's what astrologers know to be true. Energy is constantly like this wave. We're constantly being influenced by 12, if not more, different variations of frequency. They're constantly playing out and affecting our personal, dependent on our personal energetic imprint, will affect us in different ways. Now, the last part I want to mention before I wrap up this video completely is how the principle of correspondence teaches us wisdom. Okay, and so this wisdom really comes down to two, maybe three things here. The first one is that the principle of correspondence teaches us to stop fighting ourselves. There is a biblical and very American political quote, which you know, which is that the house divided against itself cannot stand, which is heard in politics a lot, but it's a biblical quote. The house divided against itself cannot stand. And you are that house. This is the house of your soul. Your body here, we don't devalidate the body. The body is here as a container for your soul to express itself in this version of our reality, in this dimension of reality. And this house for yourself and for your soul, if you are at war with yourself, if you deny parts of yourself, you will diminish. You will hurt. It cannot stand, and this is not to say that you'll disintegrate. It's just to say that who you actually are, the soul is disintegrating. Your body might be fine, but the soul will begin to not be able to stand. The house cannot divide against itself, cannot stand. And so if your soul is at war with itself through not accepting your pain, you will not be able to accept yourself, to accept your joy, and you will be divided. You'll be divided, and your soul will begin to be diminished. It will get weak. And you see this in the world. When you go through the world, have you ever met someone or met people or observed people who you don't actually know, and you say they just seem like they're gone? They seem like they're zombies of themselves. They seem like ghosts. And this is because they have been divided against themselves for so long, unable to know how to handle their shadows and their pain, and so then they're fighting themselves. And then the longer this goes on, and when people just live their lives like this forever, they start to become ghosts of themselves, zombies of themselves. So the principle of correspondence, through the principle of correspondence, the wisdom I want to share with you is that you don't fight yourself. Stop trying to fight yourself. Stop trying to tell yourself you can't be certain things. That's your shadow speaking. Embrace all parts of yourself, and this is going to look like a slow journey. Don't expect to one day overnight just suddenly be like, okay, I'm so happy with all parts of myself. It doesn't happen that simple. Or I should say it does happen that simple, but it doesn't happen that fast. Little by little, you slowly begin to tune in with the parts of yourself that you are fighting. And this is the key part. What are you fighting? When you wake up in the morning, what are you resisting? What are you avoiding? What aren't you surrendering to? This is why when I went through my dark night of the soul, or when I was learning and integrating the wisdom of the principle of correspondence, not only did I have on my wall the words as above, so below, as within, so without, but I also had the words of surrender and accept. Acceptance and surrender were also two words that were also hung up on my wall. And I think that is a way to stop fighting. Those are the keys. Those are actually the yin-yang opposite of fighting yourself. Fighting yourself is resistance. And one of the ways you can begin to not fight yourself is to tune in and check in with yourself often and say, what am I resisting? What am I resisting? And it's going to take some time for you're going to need a level of mindfulness. You're going to need some awareness to be able to answer that question. But it's so important that you do, because that's how you surrender. That's how you surrender. That's how you stop fighting yourself. That's how you become embodied into the house of yourself. How you house your soul and stop dividing your soul into these different horcruxes of yourself, to bring up that term that I used in my last video. So stop fighting yourself. Surrender, accept, and tune into yourself. Now, the other part of this that I want to share is the second part for you to integrate this wisdom in the end with, is to realize that all corresponds. So what I mean by this is and it's really just to take what I said earlier and to turn this into applicable knowledge. Remember how I said, well, your inner world didn't manifest your outer world, so whatever you believe about yourself, you're going to see it in the world all over again. Well, on the other way around is that you look at the world and you see the things that commonly occur, and you realize that says something about your inner world. And so with those two knowledges, that inner creates outer and outer creates inner, or outer indicates inner, both ways, holding those two dualities, realize that if something occurs in your life, stop trying to make the cause be something external. Take total ownership and realize that it's your inner that created it. It was not something out there that did anything. This removes any possibility of victim mentality. Just disintegrates it. Because you realize that it is your inner psyche that creates all those things in the external world. And this applies to everything from, like, you have conflicts with people. You have something bad. Maybe you hear bad news at work. You go through a struggle. You go through something, God forbid, a physical struggle in your life, a physical injury or something. Or maybe you just have some small health ailment. I think health is, we talk about over in our group membership academy, Be the Hero Academy, we help people reach vibrant health, passionate relationships, and purposeful work. And this is why the reason we do all three of those things is because those are the three main areas in our life where we see things, conflicts and struggles occur. It's also where we have desires. We want vibrant health. We want passionate relationships. We want purposeful careers. Those three areas are key areas where we can kind of start to tuning into those three areas and going, okay, something occurs there. It's not something out there that created it. It wasn't caused by the external, it was the internal. Health is an extremely amazing way to tune into this, and I've shared this in other videos before, but your health is an expression of you living your purpose and learn lessons. When you have something show up for you in your physical body, It's not because something you ate. It's not because you were something with the sun. It doesn't have something to do with whatever, the environment that you're in. Sure, those might be contributing, but that's all still based on the idea of this three-dimensional reality creating the fundamental laws for the way that things work. What if you just took ownership and realized that if you have a stomachache, what were you thinking? What was your inner world like? If it expresses itself in this material body, it's still coming from the inner psyche. And using that, you can begin to understand yourself far deeper than you've ever been able to understand yourself. You will be given the key to nurturing yourself and to loving yourself and to seeing yourself for the first time, to see your soul and not be at war with your soul. And last but not least, the very last thing I want to mention with the principle of correspondence that I've only recently understood and been awakened to and been integrated the wisdom of is this idea that principle of correspondence is not going to make your life utter perfection. I mean, everything is perfection, but it's perfectly imperfect in this dimension. Everything is perfect. But I think sometimes when we are looking to wisdom, when we are looking to spiritual knowledge, we're hoping to be given this secret that is suddenly going to relieve all of our suffering. And that is not the case. It will never be the case, because suffering, if we didn't know suffering, we wouldn't know joy. Easy. If we didn't know suffering, we wouldn't know joy. And even if we knew suffering at one point in our lives, if we stopped experiencing suffering altogether, how would we know when we are experiencing that immense joy, that immense love? And so, one of the things I've recently stumbled upon, I shared with you how I went through this dark night of soul and I came out of it and I shined my light for the first time. And that year of really shining my light made me step into a life I have never been so excited to live. Never in my life have I loved my life so much. And it is perhaps because I have never in my life loved myself so much. It's another example of the principle of correspondence. But yet, the thing I wanted to point out about that is also, I go through my life and I go through the worst struggles I've ever experienced in my life still. And this sounds like I'm just making up that, everything that we're going through might seem like, it always seems like it's the worst it's been. But I distinctly remember the things I've gone through in my life that brought me into that dark night of the soul that I thought were so bad and so hard. But they weren't necessarily in the fact that, my point being that when I go through my life, I experience a greater spectrum of high and low. The principle of correspondence has taught me that the greater I enjoy my life, the deeper I have to be willing to embrace my pain and suffering. And that doesn't sound like beautiful and sexy, and yet it is. It is beautiful because this is the principles of reality, the principles of the nature of reality. The deeper you go into yourself, the more you will enjoy your life, but the same goes the other way around. And that is okay. I'm here to tell you that it is worthwhile to experience those highs, and I shouldn't even say highs, the high vibrational state of you being here, the highest vibrational state that you can embody, which is that love, light, and joy. The more you experience that, and the longer you experience it, you're going to go through the worst conflicts. You're going to go through worse suffering. You're going to have to keep growing in order to be able to experiencing those things. And this is that saying that I partly love and partly hate, this idea that God, the universe, the world, never gives you more than you can handle. And this is because of that idea that there's always balance. Now, I'm kind of touching on a later Hermetic principle, but this is the whole idea that these all build on each other. So, wrapping that all up, as within, so without, as above, so below. Everything in your world is your inner world. All corresponds. So stop fighting yourself. I hope this video helped you guys to understand the wisdom of the Kybalion of Hermes Trismegistus's principle number 2, which is the principle of correspondence. If you guys like this video, please let me know in the comments below. Let me know what you didn't like. Again, this is just my personal interpretation of the Kybalion. Let me know what of my thoughts you agree with, you resonate with, or let's talk about it. You know, I love essentially philosophical debate. Let me know what parts of this you disagreed with or you think that I didn't touch on. Let me know in the comments below. And if you just liked it in general and this was entertaining and helpful and a good piece of wisdom for you, hit the like button. This helps my video be seen by more people, and it helps me, encourages me to continue to make videos like this, sharing my wisdom, or sharing not my wisdom, but my interpretation of the wisdom of the Kybalion and of other ancient philosophies. If you guys don't already subscribe to the channel, you should be. Subscribe to Be the Hero by hitting that subscribe button down below. Thank you guys for joining me in this video. Namaste.